When you're planning an essay, half the battle is to ask yourself the right questions. The essay title will usually come in the form of a question, perhaps to what extent did something happen, or do you agree that something is the case? You then need to break that up into smaller questions, usually what and when questions, so you actually pick out the key contributors to the essay. You answer each one of those in turn, and when you've answered them all, you'll end up with an overall answer to the title. So this asks about the aims of the Persian invasion of 480 BC. So your first question has got to be, what were those aims? We discussed these yesterday. There's a few. First of all, if you think about the leaders of the invasion, the people who were heading up the Persian enterprise, we've got two key figures to think about. One is Xerxes, who is a new king. The other is Mardonius, who was the military leader of the invasion. Now, each of them had their own reasons for wanting to have a successful expedition into Greece in 480. Xerxes, because as a new king and Darius' successor, saw himself very much as Darius's as his heir, which indeed he was, and just as Darius had wanted to expand the Persian Empire westwards into Greece, so Xerxes shares that aim. For Mardonius, there are some long speeches in Herodotus Book 7, which give you his view on it, and there's a photograph which is in teams, showing you quite a key passage in one of those speeches, where he says that his intention is to conquer not just Greece, but all of Europe. So Mardonius is quite a key figure in finding out those aims. Now, when you've considered the leaders, then think about the historical context. Think about the background. In the 490s, there had been the Ionian revolt. Okay, the Persians had suppressed that, but not before the Athenians helped the Ionians. And Persia wanted revenge on Athens more than on any other Greek state. They'd had a go at Marathon, but they'd failed there. The Athenians had beat Persia at Marathon. That was another reason why Persia had it in for the Athenians, and clearly wanted their revenge. Moving on from the actual aims of the expedition, you're going to need to ask, what were the actual events of 480 before you're able to evaluate how successful they were? So you start with the preparations before the expedition, and in Persia those preparations were extensive. There's a lot of information on those on the PowerPoint on Thermopylae, Artemisium and Salamis, which I shared for you in Show B and we looked at last term. The Persians involved themselves in very extensive planning. They built a bridge across the Hellespont. They dug a canal at Athos so as to avoid the problems which Mardonius had last time he'd invaded Greece in 492, when his fleet was destroyed in storms around Athos. That was all part of the preparation. Then we look at the battles. First of all, Artemisium, where there were some significant Persian losses, not really because of the Greeks, but because of forces of nature. They lost ships in 2 storms. Then we look at the Battle of Thermopylae, where the Persians, in a sense, should not have been expected to win, even though they outnumbered the Greeks. The Spartan phalanx had if you remember, got themselves into a position of strategic importance. They should have blocked off the Persians, and they would have done so if they hadn't had a spy on their side, Ephialtes, together with others who basically deceived their own people, betrayed their own people, and told the Spartans, the Persians, of the secret Anapia Pass, and that's why the Persians won at Thermopylae. So that would need to go into your essay. And then continuing with the events, you'd need to talk about the Battle of Salamis, And here the Persians, they lose again. They might have been expected to win because they were a much bigger fleet and their ships were faster than the Athenian ships. They were more manoeuvrable. We've talked about this, but surprisingly, they lose at Salamis. So by the end of the summer of 480, the Persians have had some gains. They've conquered quite a lot of Attica and Athens, but they've lost their ships at Salamis, and that's quite a resounding defeat. That puts them in a difficult position because if Mardonius goes home at this point, he'll come back on the losing side and pay the price for that. But both he and Artemisia persuade Xerxes that he as king can go back to Persia and enjoy the reputation of the victory that the Persians have won at Thermopylae. And again, if you read that in Herodotus in Book 8, Xerxes goes back to Persia, and he's delighted to be able to escape, one feels, back to his own empire. When you have looked through the events, chiefly the events of those three battles in 480, it's time to turn to the third section of your essay, which is where you're going to evaluate the title. Did Persia succeed? Did they succeed in their aims? Well, here's aim 1, conquering Athens, getting their revenge on Athens. Well, this is a yes and no answer. Yes, because after Thermopylae they invaded Attica, they did sack the Acropolis, they did force the Athenians to evacuate their families. But no, because the Athenians led the Greeks in a resounding naval victory over the Persians at Salamis. And if you consider Salamis, the Persians were clearly losers there. Now think about another aim. When we said at the beginning that Xerxes wanted to expand the Persian Empire, did he succeed? Did the Persians succeed in doing that? Well, no, they didn't, because in fact, rather than expand their empire in 480, they lost land because they lost control of some of the Aegean islands directly after the Battle of Salamis. Another question you could ask is, did they succeed in the aim of planning a highly organised invasion? Well, yes, the planning that the Persians did for this invasion was extensive. It included building this bridge over the Hellespont, which allowed them to take troops by land over that stretch of sea, and also it included them building a canal. Word may not be clearly written here, but it's canal at Athos, and that was successful. Because of those engineering feats, they were enabled to take huge numbers over to Greece, and in all of the battles of 480, the Persians significantly outnumbered the Greeks. So, yes, they succeeded in some of their aims. They didn't overall succeed. And if you bear in mind that the Persian invasion of 480 wasn't entirely over until 479, when the last two battles of the Persian War, the battles of Plataea and Cape Mycale, finally both resulted in a resounding victory for the Greeks. It means that overall, you would have to say, in answer to the title, that the Persian invasion of 480 did not succeed in its aims. In terms of your overall structure, you can be quite free to organise this essay any way you like, but I would suggest that a very sensible way of structuring it is, first of all, outline the aims of the expedition. Secondly, middle section, go through the events, discussing each in turn, make it clear what happened, and finally, return to your question with an evaluation. Were those aims successful or not?